How many of you grew up in Montana?
Sort of.
Sort of? All right. Montana, he will, but he can't read yet. Yes. Gary mentioned that I'd written a trilogy. Well, I'm afraid it's going to be a quartet. What got me to writing 3 books with the 4th one now, I'm now in the planning stages of the 4th one, which will carry the whole series through November 1864 and into February of 1865, was that during this time I discovered there was no law. Montana had no code of law. In fact, during the time of God's thunderbolt, we weren't even Montana yet. We were part of Idaho. We were East Idaho. Isn't that a concept to wrap your brain around? East Idaho. And we'd still be East Idaho if it hadn't been for some of the events in these books. The Civil War was on. It was Union versus Confederate. People had fled the Civil War and come out to the gold fields of Alder Gulch, and the Confederacy was in the majority. There were refugees from the various Confederate armies and a few from the Union armies. And the problem was, though, the administration of the new territory was appointed by Abraham Lincoln. They were Union. So we had a battle between Union and Confederates. No blood was shed over the war, but plenty of blood was shed for other reasons. Idaho Territory was composed of parts of 4 other territories: Washington, Oregon, Nevada, and Dakota, but Congress failed to assign any code of law to Idaho from any one of the other 4. Consequently, there was no code of law. If you did something awful, there was no law against it. So think of it this way. $20 million worth of gold lying in the streams of Alder Gulch. And nobody to tell you, don't take it away from somebody else. So obviously, the people that were going to take it away did. And robbery and murder ran rampant up and down the roads between Alder Gulch, or Virginia City, and Bannock. There was just no stopping them. It got to the point where people couldn't figure out who was honest, who wasn't. They didn't dare tell anybody where they were going. They would buy a ticket on the stagecoach to leave town with their gold, and the stage would be robbed. It turned out that there was a criminal conspiracy going on that was led by the one man everybody thought was the sheriff. What law Henry Plummer was maintaining is unclear, because there wasn't any. But eventually the vigilantes broke the backs of the criminal conspiracy by hanging more than 20 men. They rode far and wide in the middle of winter to do it. They came up to Hellgate and hanged about 5 or 6, and they hanged 5 at once in Virginia City itself. And after that, they could consider that the area was relatively safe. Certainly the vigilantes ruled at that point. There was no telegraph, no communication, no texting. And the winter of 1864-65 was so bad that stagecoaches and horses and oxen and mules could not get through. They hired men to go between the towns and deliver the mail. And the situation with the law was so bad that in 1867, the Supreme Court of Idaho Territory ruled in favor of a man who had been incarcerated for something, and said that because there had been no law, he had broken no law. So they let him out. Consequently, they let out every felon who was convicted of a crime during the year between 1863 and 1864. Now, Montana avoided that because of the vigilantes. They didn't incarcerate people, they hanged them, which is rather appalling to us now. But there was no jail, no law enforcement, except for the vigilantes. In God's Thunderbolt, that's the historical background. About a month after the vigilantes have finished with their cleanup of the territory, Jack Slade comes to town. Now, I've already explained that Jack Slade was a drinker and destroyed towns. But the thing about this one is that the vigilantes had set up what they called a people's court. And the people's court was headed by a judge that they selected, or they asked him to serve. And this judge, named Alexander Davis, was an opponent of the vigilantes, and yet they named him to be judge of this people's court. And he's the one who, when Slade put a gun to his head while he was writing out the warrant, he didn't think that Slade would shoot him. So he just stood there and went on with what he was doing. But the vigilantes knew that if they let Slade win, they would lose control of the area, and that gave the bad guys a chance to come back. They could just see their hold slipping away and crime reasserting itself. Now, the third novel, Gold Under Ice, is about gold and greenbacks. If you've been following the news much, does anybody follow the gold situation now? Do you know it's up over, what is it now, up over $2,000?
No, $16.50.
It went down.
Did it go down? $15.50? $16.50?
Down to 15.
Yeah, it was up over $2,000 a troy ounce for a while.
No, it got to about 1,900.
It got to
1900.
Yeah, and it dropped.
Then it dropped?
Yeah.
Oh.
About 15 knots up front. 17, 16,
16.50.
Yeah. No.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, during the time of the Civil War, it went way up to about $285 an ounce. And that was on the day that Jubal Early of the Confederate Army surrounded Washington, and people thought the Union was done for. But for some reason, Jubal Early withdrew, and the price of gold went back down a little. Central to this book is the battle between the greenbacks and gold. The greenbacks were printed by the Lincoln administration in order to fund the war. Gold was the only kind of currency that was relatively stable. And Abraham Lincoln viewed gold traders with such anger that he thought they were all traitors and should be, quote, shot in the head, unquote. Lincoln said that. Here's a little bit of this one. God's Thunderbolt won the Spur Award for the best first novel of 2009.